Don in London, hello. It's April 9th, 2013, and my videos are all about recovery from addiction to either substance or behaviour. My addictive substance was alcohol. My behaviour could be equally addictive around people, places and things, and trying to be perfect in different places with the right people, doing the right things. Always striving to succeed. And that's what I learned as I grew up. It's better to have a go, try things, strive, move where you have to make a living. And that's how I was brought up. But I was also brought up to drink, and drink I did. And drink to overcome fear, pride, ego, put on a brave face, try to make the best of what was. So drink was a companion. And at first it was convivial and fun, and was often very much fun in all sorts of situations and in different relationships, but it played a big part with me because I used drink to sleep and find oblivion very often from the truth of what was going on around me. So these days, and for a number of years, I've stopped drinking on a daily basis. In fact, I've stopped drinking altogether. Sober, one day at a time for a few years, courtesy of professional help in the beginning, who got me to being a dry drunk, and then a fellowship which helped me become a human being again. And that fellowship is AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't speak for AA, I speak about how it helps me. And it's important to know the difference. Because if I said I was a representative of AA, that would not be true, because it has no leaders. If I said I'm speaking on behalf of anyone in AA, that would not be true, because people speak for themselves where they will. And as you know in fellowship, I do not represent you, never can, never will. And the fellowship is all about sober, and some of my writing about how fellowship has helped me is about anything. It could be about opinions, beliefs, politics, being part of an organisation or something. I have a right and a freedom of choice how I can be today, given my life circumstances. So it's not a fantasy of a successful life based on materialism or anything like that. Quite the reverse, in fact. I had the materialism and I couldn't stand it. And I couldn't stand myself when I had it. That was just me. It was like a burden. It was always a burden to me. And even though I do the lottery, I'm sort of hopeful I don't win. Because it would complicate my life. In a nice way, probably. But would I be able to handle it? Well, I'd have to ask family and other people to help me with it. Because life is about being with others, being included, learning how to love them, and learning how to be loved back, really important, and find useful things to do. Happy birthday to my brother. He was a bit younger than me, but he's got another birthday, thank goodness. So I'm really pleased about that. Anyway, I'm going to talk about AA now. And I share the AA fellowship preamble, which is on this little card here. And you can find the preamble anywhere. And it's important I read it out, because it tells you what AA can do and what it's for, and your freedoms. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. So all we do is share experience, strength and hope of how we get sober and what happens when we are sober. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. So all you need is a desire to stop, or an inkling that you might need to stop, and it's free. But we are self-supporting, so we manage. But we never make money an issue, because we don't want a lot of money. That will become an issue and it will get in the way of sobriety. Now this is important. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. So AA is none of those things, but we are. So as a person, you can belong to any sect, denomination, political party, organisation or institution. You can engage in any controversy, and you can endorse or oppose any cause, because that's what it's all about. That's life. So as far as the fellowship is concerned, though, our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And how we do this is by sharing experience, strength and hope. So primary purpose is to stay sober and help others, which is why I do these videos, because I was asked. And somebody made a comment yesterday, thanks very much, because I can't get to meeting because my shift pattern has changed. It can be as simple as that. And then you can switch me off. That's the most important thing. We all do this, either in a meeting of the fellowship, or here, or with other people. We switch off when we're not satisfied, or we've had enough. So please use your freedom of choice to switch me off. That's fine. Anyway, for April 9th, 2013, it's all about step 4 this month, which is the Fearless Moral Inventory. So if we do a self-appraisal, look at our assets and liabilities, what's happened over the years, where we got angry and resentful, then we start to understand why we are the way we are and what we can do about it. Now, it's been an interesting day, 24 hours. So I'm quoting from the AA Big Book, page 417 or 449, depending on where you're looking and which edition you've got. It's about acceptance. And it's not the main paragraph that people normally read out. It says here, AA and acceptance have taught me that there is a bit of good in the worst of us and a bit of bad in the best of us, that we are all children of God. And for me that's the universe. And we each have a right to be here. Each have a right to be here. When I complain about me or about you, I am complaining about God's handiwork. I am saying that I know better than God. Now this is a bit contentious, so please switch off whenever you like, because I have some politics from the past inside me. Margaret Thatcher died yesterday at the Ritz Hotel, and she was not God, but was able to live like one. I think in the first year of her touring the countries around the world and writing a book, she made about £17 million. So, you know, that's earnings. So she's entitled to live at the Ritz, and don't forget she had dementia at the end, which is very sad. So, in 1979, Margaret Thatcher won the parliamentary elections in the UK with a majority of 44 seats. At the time I was studying politics at university, which was then called a polytechnic, amongst other social science subjects. It felt like a devastating blow, and the rise of a mentality of self-interest and selfishness. It was a good day to get drunk and stay drunk for the next few decades, in my case. I thought it was the worst day of my life, and I don't know that many people saw it that way. I embraced the work hard and play hard ethic in the end. I could not understand the hubris of what was to come. Nationalism in the Falklands, saving several hundred people from Argentina, and God knows how much wealth underneath it. Of course that was probably part of it. We could have brought them all here, it would have been cheaper, but we didn't do that. So nationalism, anti-Europe and undermining détente, fostering deeper alliances with America, which I always thought was a good thing, and opening a dialogue with the Soviet Union, which led to glasnost, which was what happened. Look what happened to Russia. Undermining British manufacturing, undermining traditional resource industries, mining for example, introducing a one-off opportunity for those who aspire to own their own home, and then denying the rights of others to social housing, beginning the dismantling of the welfare state, deregulating financial services, which led to the 2008 debacle. The introduction of a poll tax, which was then made into something else called the council tax. The exclusion of unions representing working people and diminishing them. Turning the UK into a corner shop mentality. Undermining British farming. Encouraging the sell-off of all national assets like phones, water, electric, mobile phone, broadband and all the rest of it. So national assets now in the hands of private companies and energy supplies increasing in prices all the time. Once I joined the rat race back in 1981, and enjoyed some of the benefits, it was easy to forget the horrible times being inflicted in many parts of the country. And then a horrible one which happened next was making students pay for their university education, which came later, of course. For me, though, I was mobile. I would travel and work anywhere because I had to. There was no work where I graduated. There was no work where my parents lived. There was nothing. I just had to keep on travelling and find something to do, which I did. But not everybody can do that. The idea that everybody's mobile is not true, especially if you bought your bloody house and you're not paying rent. Anyway, so I was mobile and I could get about, and there was no time to consider the consequences because we were caught up in the moment. We all channeled ourselves into self-interest and not the greater good, and this broke me as much as anything to express any sentiment for the greater good of the nation, which was always prejudiced and diminished by those who had something to lose, and in the end we all lost because of it. Often national pride swelled and the nation was going down the drain spectacularly. And of course the horror of the troubles in Northern Ireland, and I used to go to Northern Ireland for work, and it was difficult, and there is no right and wrong. The sides were made by history, and whichever side of the divide you're on, there is only one thing to do in the end, which is work out how to live together and stop this thing of boundaries. Anyway, that's me. So fear, pride and ego underpinned much of what went on, and anyone can see it if they choose to. At the same time, who am I to judge? Powerless over government and policies, and riots in the streets did nothing to stop what happened. And even when 1 million people marched on Parliament and Tony Blair was setting up a document to approve the war in Iraq, as Ramdas would say, of course I could be wrong. Probably am wrong on some of those things, but my memories of those times, to live in those times, even if you were successful, it felt wrong, for me anyway. Courage to change, faith in doing the next right thing, and developing confidence to keep alive one day at a time and be sober. That's me today. Now that's a good starting point. This morning I've been listening to the rhetoric of many people sharing their opinions about matters that have happened since 1979. And as we are clearly dismantling the welfare state in the United Kingdom, because it's too expensive in our current economic climate, we might ask why we needed a welfare state in the first place. We needed a welfare state because there was no national health service, there was little in terms of state pension, and little regard for the plight of those who could not enjoy the luxury afforded the few in our society, which was to be able to look after yourself when you're ill. Every time we take something away from what was all about welfare and helping people, we are likely to undermine the very fabric of what a big society is all about. Big society is about everyone and fairness, according to politicians on the right. This is how it's going to work, by using a sledgehammer and divisive politics to segregate striving poor people from skiving poor people. And the actual cost of the skiving poor people is negligent. Well, it's negligible. Well, it's significant as a statistic, but in terms of the national debt and where we spend on the welfare bill, it's on people who are striving and working and pensioners who have worked hard. And yet it is the striving poor people paying the majority of the tax who are suffering more than any other social class in our current economic crisis. So it's the striving poor people paying direct taxation, and the other one, the big one, indirect taxation, which everybody pays, don't forget, which goes to the exchequer. Indirect taxation is all the taxation on what you buy, which has duty. Well, it's taxed. Your petrol, your cigarettes, your alcohol. Those were the things which used to pay for the welfare state, but since we've stopped doing those things, there's not enough money. That's not true. That isn't the reason why we haven't got the money to do it. It's the other economic policies which are driving things down all the time. So those who have paid the majority of tax and continue to do so are the ones who are going to feel it most. And if anybody cares to look back, it is always those who strive, the majority doing the best they can, who pay the most, and now are going to get the least help. Not only now, as things are being dismantled further, they are the ones who will have no say or benefit in the future. As Ram Dass would say, Richard Alpert is Ram Dass. If you're aware of Ram Dass, he's a philosopher. He used to say at the end of his lectures, "Of course I could be wrong." And that applies to me too. I'm not, and that's a serious point. I could be wrong. And if you have a different point of view, excellent. I just hope it's for the greater good. Anyway, I'm really grateful that my parents were gifted with a desire to work hard and do the best they could, and they did. Both intelligent, and yet both were unable to complete their education. There was a war on. And even when the war was over, my mum, as a single person, was expected to go out to work and not continue education, because girls didn't do that. My father came back after the war to a land fit for heroes, and it wasn't. It was 10 years of rationing. And we were paying back our cousins in America for, well, I don't know how long for, but for a very long time. Probably still are in some ways. And rightly, because we borrowed the money for the war. Don't get me wrong. So, both my parents are at a disadvantage, and yet even though they were unable to complete their education, they did do their best to make sure that I and my brother and sister had a roof over our heads, got to school, and they did look after us the best they could. So I'm very grateful. And even though my father succumbed to drink and had breakdowns, which meant we all had to go out to work, all of us started higher education, even though it took a few years longer. Definitely, we had to go out to work because that was just what was needed. There was no grant for me or my brother or sister which could be sustained. So we went out to work, and we did part-time things to keep in education as well. So for a few years education was disrupted. We did pretty well, and my brother and sister are very successful, and I'm successful at being sober. And I'm gratified that I'm still alive and can do things which are helpful. So, and we strived, and still in my case, I could never vote for the Conservative who promised the earth and delivered nothing but hardship, and continue to break down and dismantle what is left of the welfare state. Even when they were ousted back in '97 by Tony Blair, and he said, education, education and education. I remember those words from the middle-of-the-road Prime Minister Tony Blair. And then he went to war, and he continued to make education more expensive and forcing the cost onto the student. And he was in plausible deniability about everything he ever did. And then he converted to being a Roman Catholic. And he's now somewhere doing something. I hope it's working out. Anyway, there were 1 million people marched, and that made no difference. So what about me? Well, powerless. In 1979, everyone knew what was going on. Everyone knew what was going on and what was going to happen. It's no wonder that the impact of Thatcher and Blair will haunt us for a good deal longer than is good for us. one day at a time, we can incrementally improve our own situation. So if we improve ourselves and what we can do for others, and give back, freely given, freely received, give back sobriety, give back freedom of choice in a life. Lots of people get back into a life. We all do. And some of us, take longer at it. One day at a time, we can incrementally improve our own situation. And in the future, we can be careful about how we vote for people who have great influence and impact on our future, if only they told us the truth about what they were going to do next. And they're not hostages to fortune, generally. When you look at the Falklands, it was nationalism. When you look at Iraq, it was the consequences of 9/11 and a desire to finish off something which had been started over a decade before. And I don't underestimate I don't think it was enthusiasm for it, but the absolute necessity to do it by some, and why they felt that way. But the outcomes were horrible. Horrible, horrible. Yeah, they are horrible recollections. This morning I'm amazed at the fawning of David Cameron, our current UK Prime Minister. And I worry about what he's going to say tomorrow, having recalled Parliament for a special session because of the death of Margaret Thatcher. Now, that was a dumb move on his part? ? Because if he stands up in Parliament, and I don't know what he's going to do. Anyway, as Ram Dass would say, of course I could be wrong about what's going to happen. But it's fuel to wounds which have not, it's scratching the scabs. That's what they used to call people. They used to call people who didn't go with the unions scabs. And those people had horrible times because of it too, because they were they bought the philosophy. Horrible things went on. Anyway, so what is all this, and what's it got to do with sobriety today? Everything. In fellowship, this is true. In the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous yesterday, probably had a lot of extra grit in it, as experience, strength and hope was shared in meetings in the UK about what happened during the Thatcher years and the Blair years. Thank God that Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside matters, which will get in the way of sobriety one day at a time. And of course, what will happen in meetings, people will say, well, I was all for it or I was against it, and it's turned out all right, hasn't it? Because you've still got something left at the end of it. But AA has no opinion on outside matters, and this is really important because we're there for sober. So we will hear lots and lots of things and lots of politics flying around at the moment, which is natural. And then we come to the conclusion, well, fellowship is for sobriety, and we're entitled to our opinions. And if we can hold that thought and feel okay with it, feel it's okay for people to have different opinions to me, all good, because then we're keeping the debates open. Politics is working, AA is working, because it has no outside interests. And then you can go for a cup of coffee and have a good shouting match afterwards. So, thank God for AA being the way it is. No opinion on outside matters, which will get in the way of sobriety one day at a time. And yet, the media will fuel the debate about the virtues and vices of our politicians. And today, as people look back at Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, the architect of the city deregulation, and from welfare to greed, short-term thinking and not long-term planning, corner shop mentality, arguing with Europe, self-regulating casino banking, restricting and impairing the ability of the people to be mobile and flexible, to cut and keep on cutting, shrinking the economy, shrinking the opportunity for work, shrinking innovation, shrinking entrepreneurial skills, shrinking capital investment, shrinking pensions, shrink, shrink and shrink again. The good news, sober we see what is happening, sober to challenge what is happening, and most important in my case, let it go, because I'm really powerless over people, places and things, and I prefer to be powerless over all these things as if I had a choice. Knowing I'm powerless, I can let go at the same time, because I can see the hubris, all this noise going on. I can be angry, and oddly, I'm not angry at Margaret Thatcher or Tony Blair. I'm angry that we have a state of mind in this country which allows people who are probably good to end up doing bad things, because they just don't know any better. But I think they do, you see. Or did they? I must see that I could do no better myself if I were in charge, and that is never going to happen, fortunately for you. But it is pride, ego and fear which drives a lot of this thing about nationalism, keeping the Falklands and the oil underneath, or the gas and the fracking possibilities. We didn't save the Falklands for the sheep or the people particularly, although the argument will be raging over that. If we cared as much as we did for people in our own country as we did for the Falklands, there's a big question mark there in my mind about politics, ideology, welfare state, the greater good, the big society, all these things. The big society, dismantling the welfare state, shrinking everything, making everything local and not governmental. Some people think that's a good thing, but you can't run a medical service from a doctor's practice. You can't run a hospital based on management by a doctor in a practice. It's been tried in many organisations, and they've gone back to the old way. Just ask any bank, ask any oil industry, yes, ask any government. Anyway, if I were in charge, and that is never going to happen, as Ram Dass would say, of course I could be wrong. This is an example of someone getting into a rant and also understanding what I can do and what I can't do, and the wisdom to know the difference. I cannot change the attitudes of people or the ideology which in 1979 made me drink myself stupid and do it continually because I was unhappy at the world, and I was also unhappy in myself. But I can change that today and every day since I've been sober for some years. So, we see things differently as we come through, from pride, fear and ego pulling us into demanding and being somewhat greedy and vice-ridden in our outlook, to the virtues of courage to change, faith in the next right thing, and confidence to keep on learning what the right path is, not only to help myself but to help, freely received, freely given. This is in fellowship, and I bring that philosophy to my life in many ways that you will never know about. That's just the way it is. And the whole point of this is living one day at a time with an understanding of open, honest and willing to live life and be a part of it. So from being completely out of it and disappointed and desolate and unable to do anything to help anyone, let alone myself, living in squalid places, in cellars, and I don't know. When I look back, there's an awful lot of good that happened and an awful lot of bad that happened, and it's a bit like acceptance. There's a bit of good in the worst of us, and there's a bit of bad in the best of us. But ideology, fear, pride and ego tip us the wrong way. That's what comes out in step 4. So had I had that drunken night back in 1979 and then stopped drinking, what would have been the difference? I never know, will I? But what led up to that was insecurity and fears from the past, and rebelliousness in me, and a freedom beyond belief when I went back into education from work. I don't know, it's a bit like an Amish. The youngsters have a period of time they can run away and do whatever they like. and then get back into the world of work. That's how I saw Polytechnic University life. And then I ended up in business schools doing things, helping people. Well, anyway, the good news is I can be myself today. I don't know who I am right now, so I'm going to shut up. I'm allowed to have a rant. I can feel anger and resentment at the past. And in that step 4 scenario, I see my part in it. I blamed the world and myself unfairly about what I could and couldn't do. So if I don't know, maybe I should have had the Serenity Prayers, maybe put on my arm as a tattoo. It's well embedded in my head, and it's a universal meditation of can do, cannot do, wisdom to know the difference. And it's not about risk assessment, that's a different kettle of fish. So can do, can't do, principles. So to God or in good conscience, as you choose and as you believe for yourself, because whatever you believe is good. I hope so anyway. So to God grant me the serenity. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. To accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things I can. And the wisdom to know the difference. Just for today. So, whatever happens with Margaret Thatcher, what happens with anything, not up to me really. But I remember what happened, and people can have a very distorted view. You can say she changed the world, she did this and she did that. She certainly did do things, and I saw a lot of what she did, and I don't really feel right about what people think she did. Anyway, hopefully I'll demonstrate. That's all really step 4 and step 10 work. What happened to me because of what she did was quite dreadful. But it's okay because I worked through it. But what about the millions of people and the hundreds of thousands of people who were left with nothing to do, thrown onto the dole and then put on incapacity benefit because it could get the unemployment figures down? You can see where I'm coming from, can't you? So the I am all right Jack attitude, well, it was all right for me. I made a living and I paid my taxes. At the same time, the dismantling of our manufacturing industry and resources being sold off. I don't approve of that at all. I'm going to shut up. I've had my rant. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just for today, thankfully, and every day, very thankfully.